In the early hours of Christmas morning in 1945, a fire ravaged the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, leaving behind a trail of ashes and unanswered questions that would persist for the better part of a century. George Sodder, an Italian immigrant who had built a successful coal hauling business, and his wife Jenny had 10 children living under their roof that night. The family had gone to bed after a festive Christmas Eve, with stockings hung and presents waiting beneath the tree. 9 of the children escaped the inferno, but 5 of them, ranging in age from 5 to 14, were nowhere to be found. No bones, no teeth, no remains of any kind were ever recovered from the site. The mystery of the Sodder kids' disappearance has haunted the family and the town for decades, with numerous investigations and theories emerging over the years, but no concrete evidence has ever surfaced to explain what happened to those 5 missing children. The night of the fire was a chaotic one, with the family's home being reduced to rubble in a matter of hours. George Sodder was awakened around 1 in the morning by a phone call from someone he did not recognize, a woman who asked for a name he had never heard, then laughed before hanging up. Jenny noticed that the lights were still on downstairs and that the front door was unlocked, both unusual for that time of night. Shortly after, she smelled smoke.
The parents, George and Jenny Sodder, were left to pick up the pieces, but their grief was compounded by the realization that 5 of their children were unaccounted for.
Maurice, age 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, just 5 years old, had been sleeping upstairs. George attempted to rescue them, but his ladder, which he always kept propped against the side of the house, was missing. He tried to use a hauling truck to reach the 2nd floor, but the engine would not start, despite having worked perfectly that afternoon. Even more strangely, both of the family's phones were dead, so a neighbor had to drive a mile to the nearest phone to call the fire department. The fire department and local authorities launched an investigation, but they found no bodies in the ruins, leading many to speculate that the children might have escaped the fire, only to vanish into the night. Theories abounded, from the possibility of the children being abducted to the idea that they might have perished in the fire, with their bodies being completely consumed by the flames. But cremation experts would later point out that a house fire, even an intense one, does not burn hot enough to completely destroy human bones, which require sustained temperatures above 1700 degrees Fahrenheit. You're watching Mind Blown, where we uncover the stories that defy explanation. The Sodder kids' disappearance is one such story that has left investigators and the public baffled for generations. As we delve deeper into the mystery, we find that the case is full of inconsistencies and unexplained events that stack upon each other like a house of cards. The fire that ravaged the Sodder home was deemed to be caused by an electrical fault, but an electrician had recently inspected the wiring and declared it safe. The fire chief, F.J. Morris, initially ruled that the children had died in the blaze, yet he later changed his report to list the cause as faulty wiring, without any forensic basis. The lack of bodies, the strange circumstances surrounding the fire, and the numerous sightings of the missing children over the years have all contributed to the mystique surrounding the case. George Sodder was so convinced his children were alive that he hired a private investigator and erected a billboard along Route 16 featuring photos of the 5 missing kids, offering a reward for information. That billboard stood for decades, a roadside monument to a father's refusal to accept what authorities told him.
Here is where the story takes a turn, as the investigation into the fire and the disappearance of the Sodder kids revealed some surprising inconsistencies that go far beyond what a simple house fire should produce.
The official report stated that the fire was so intense that it would have been impossible for the children to escape. Yet there were reports of people seeing the children in the area in the days and weeks following the fire. A woman at a Charleston hotel claimed she saw the children eating breakfast the morning after the fire, accompanied by 2 adults, one of whom was a dark-haired woman of Italian descent and a man of Mediterranean appearance. She said when she tried to speak to the children, the adults hurried them away and told her to mind her own business. The data tells a different story from the official account, with many of the witnesses describing the children as appearing frightened or subdued, as though they were being held against their will.
A tourist from out of state told the Sodders she had seen a girl matching Betty's description at a roadside rest stop in Virginia, crying and asking strangers for help.
This raises more questions than answers, as the possibility of the children being abducted by someone connected to the family is a very real one.
George Sodder had been outspoken against Mussolini's fascist regime at a time when Italian immigrant communities were deeply divided on the issue, and months before the fire, a stranger had visited the home and threatened him, saying his house would go up in smoke and his children would be destroyed.
The disappearance of the Sodder kids matters because it highlights the fragility of life and the unpredictability of events, but more importantly, it exposes the failures of a small-town justice system in mid-century America. The local coroner never conducted a proper forensic investigation of the site. When George Sodder hired someone to excavate the ruins in 1949, for years after the fire, they found a few small bone fragments and what appeared to be vertebrae.
These were sent to the Smithsonian Institution for analysis, and the results were devastating to the official narrative. The Smithsonian concluded that the bones were likely not from children at all, and that no conclusive evidence of human death could be found at the site.
The case serves as a reminder that even in the most ordinary of circumstances, extraordinary things can happen, and that the truth is often stranger than fiction.
The question that arises from this case is, what really happened to the Sodder kids? Did they perish in the fire, or were they taken by someone with a vendetta against their father? In 1967, more than 20 years after the fire, Jenny Sodder received an envelope postmarked from Kentucky containing a photograph of a young man who bore a striking resemblance to her son Louis. On the back, someone had scrawled the words, "Louis Sodder. I love Brother Frankie. A 90132 or 35. The handwriting was never identified, and the man in the photograph was never found.
The answer to this mystery may never be fully known, but one thing is certain. This case is far more than a tragic house fire. As we continue to unravel the mystery of the Sodder kids' disappearance, we are left with more questions than answers.
The case is a complex web of events, with many threads that lead to different and often contradictory conclusions.
And the evidence pointed somewhere no one expected, as the investigation revealed that the fire might not have been an accident, but a deliberate act of arson.
In the months leading up to the fire, someone had thrown a homemade napalm-like device onto the roof of the Sodder home, which failed to ignite. A cut telephone line was later discovered near the property, explaining why the phones were dead that night. The missing ladder, the truck that wouldn't start, the delayed response from the fire department, who took nearly 7 hours to arrive at a location only 2 miles from the station. Look at the timeline again, and it becomes clear that the events surrounding the fire were not as straightforward as they seemed. Each detail on its own might be coincidence, but taken together, they paint a picture of deliberate, coordinated sabotage designed to ensure the family could not escape or call for help. The Sodder kids' disappearance is a case that has been studied by many experts, including forensic scientists, criminal profilers, and investigative journalists, who have all tried to make sense of the events. Some researchers have drawn parallels to organized crime activity in the coal mining regions of West Virginia during the 1940s, where Italian immigrant families were sometimes targeted for their political views or business rivalries. George Sodder's insurance agent, who was also a member of the local fire department, had previously suggested George take out a larger life insurance policy on his children, a suggestion George angrily refused. That same man served on the coroner's jury that ruled the children had died in the fire. The conflicts of interest in this case are staggering by modern investigative standards. The American frontier regions of Appalachia, where the Sodder family lived, were vast and isolated, with dense forests and networks of back roads that made it possible for people to vanish without a trace. In an era before Amber Alerts, national databases, or interstate law enforcement cooperation, 5 children could disappear and simply cease to exist in any official record.
The case of the Sodder kids is a reminder that justice delayed is often justice denied, and that the answer to the mystery may be found in the evidence that was deliberately suppressed or carelessly overlooked.
George Sodder spent the rest of his life searching for his children, investing his entire savings into private investigators and following up on hundreds of tips that led nowhere. He died in 1969, still believing his children were alive.
Jenny continued the search until her own death in 1989, at which point the billboard was finally taken down.
Their surviving children carried the burden forward, maintaining a website and fielding calls from tipsters well into the 21st century. As we continue to investigate the case, we are left with a sense of dread, wondering what really happened to those 5 kids on Christmas morning. The case is a complex puzzle, with pieces scattered across decades, state lines, and institutional failures. And as we fit the pieces together, we are left with a sense of unease, wondering how many other families have been failed by the very systems designed to protect them, and what other secrets remain buried in the historical record, waiting to be uncovered. In the end, the disappearance of the Sodder kids remains one of America's most enduring unsolved mysteries. No arrests were ever made, no suspects were ever formally named, and no definitive evidence has ever established whether the children died that night or were spirited away to live entirely different lives. The case is a reminder that the truth is often stranger than fiction, and that beneath the surface of small-town America, dark currents have always run deep.
As we close this chapter on the Sodder kids, we are left with a sense of wonder and sorrow, thinking about 5 children who vanished on a night that should have been filled with joy, and a family that never stopped looking for them. What do you think happened to the Sodder kids? Subscribe to Mind Blown for more stories that will blow your mind.